No flow. A no-flow alert is created when a controller is not measuring any flow during manual or scheduled irrigation. So a no-flow alert is created when the controller is expecting to measure flow and isn't measuring any. If your irrigation is being interrupted by no-flow alerts and you don't have a flow sensor installed on your system, someone has accidentally turned on the flow features on your system and all you have to do is turn them off. This can be done at either the controller or, as you'll see here, at weathertrack.net, where we go to the program page and the flow settings, and we look at our point of connection settings where we see the flow sensor mode, and this is the setting that turns on the flow features. If you don't have a flow sensor, this should be set to off, or you will start getting no flow alerts. Only when you install a flow sensor do you turn this on and program it by setting up our main lines, where first we set up our mainline break alerts, and here's where we program those critical no flow alerts settings: the no flow mode, the no flow threshold, and the no flow delay. A no flow delay is the number of minutes that you want to program to allow the system to hydraulically balance before the alert assessment takes place, or let the system completely pressure up before we test for any alerts. The delay is designed to reduce the number of false alerts that happen. The no-flow threshold should be thought of as the minimum system usage, or the lowest expected measured flow on the entire system. So unlike station breaks, which are different from station to station, the no-flow alert is more like the mainline break, in that it's a system-wide setting and is the same for all stations. The no-flow threshold should be set to the minimum GPM that your flow sensor device is capable of measuring. That is to say, for every brand and size of flow sensor, there is a published minimum GPM that flow sensor will be able to manage. So in this case, if the flow sensor I had installed was a WeatherTrack Flow 3 that was a 2-inch device, then I would use this 5.3 gallons or 6 gallons per minute as the system minimum, or the no flow threshold. Because anything less than that is a garbage reading, we want to use this minimum GPM as the setting for your no flow threshold, or your starting point for measuring flow. Then during irrigation, when the water kicks on and the controller is expecting to measure flow, if you're getting a no-flow alert, that means that after the delay period has expired, the controller measured less than the minimum system usage. And then the no-flow mode allows you to select how your controller will respond when an alert is raised. And you'll have 3 possibilities: alarm in action, alarm only, or off. If you select alarm in action, as soon as the controller measures a no-flow alert for a station, it will stop irrigating that station and move on to the next station in sequence. Then, if during irrigation 3 stations in a row measure no-flow alerts, then the WeatherTrack assumes that there's a failure in a higher system component, like your backflow is shut off, or worse, your pump start is failing. To protect those higher system components, if 3 consecutive stations measure no flow, first we raise the alert, then we scrub all of the remaining scheduled irrigation for the night, which some people love and some people don't like. They would rather select the alarm only, where we raise the alert but continue to irrigate those stations. This is a handy feature to continue irrigating while you troubleshoot flow issues, or try and get your flow sensors dialed in. Or you can select off, that will turn off the no flow alert entirely. So once you've turned on your flow sensor and programmed your main lines, including your no-flow mode, threshold, and delay, you're ready to learn flow. To do that, we go to the Learn Flow page on weathertrack.net and start the Learn Flow process, where we select which stations we want to learn, and it will perform the Learn Flow test that identifies how many gallons per minute each station should use. Once we know the expected measurement of each station, we go back to the program page, and here in our flow menu you see the excluded stations. So to eliminate false alerts, any station that measures less than the no flow threshold should be excluded from no flow alert monitoring. So if you're troubleshooting a no flow alert, the most common scenarios include a system that doesn't have a flow sensor and flow features have accidentally been turned on, or if the controller has been programmed, it's very common to forget to exclude the low flow stations from monitoring and get repeated no flow alerts. But if the system is on and measuring properly and you start to get no flow alerts, this commonly means that your water has turned off in the field and you need to visit the site and look for a closed backflow or isolation valve that will prevent the system from running. And the final common scenario for no flow alerts is when you have technical issues with your flow sensor, like it's not connected or communicating, or there's a hardware failure that's preventing it from measuring correctly. And if you are out in the field checking the flow hardware and trying to validate the communication, the rule of troubleshooting is isolate, isolate, isolate. We got to figure out where that signal is getting lost. Is it getting lost in the controller, in the wire path between the controller and the flow sensor, or at the flow sensor itself? And there's a simple hardware test that makes that clear. For this, we do what I call the tap test, where we simulate a pulse to see if the controller can hear it. And we test it at the controller, at the flow sensor, and at the flow device. And all we have to do is tap two 14-gauge wires together to simulate this pulse. So starting at the controller, you want to locate where your flow sensor is plugged in. So locate those flow sensor valve wire terminals, generally the red and the black terminal, and unplug your flow sensor and replace your flow sensor wires with those testing wires, or those two spare pieces of 14-gauge wire. And then we're ready to run the test by first pushing the flow button in the lower left-hand corner of your WeatherTrack interface. And the first screen in the flow menu shows you the controller measured usage. Then we simply tap those exposed ends of the testing wire together to see if we can simulate a pulse that the controller will show as measured usage on this screen. And it might take a couple of seconds of tapping, but within a few seconds you'll start to see measured flow on the interface. That means the controller is seeing the pulse that gets generated, and we can isolate the controller out of the troubleshooting. So once we've measured flow on the controller and we know it's not a WeatherTrack issue, next we have to isolate the wire path in between the controller and the flow device. So before we leave the controller, we unplug our testing wires and put our flow sensor wires back into place. Then we go out in the field and disconnect the flow sensor in the valve box. Figure out which wires go back to the controller and tap those two wires together. Have somebody at the controller push the flow button and verify that they can see the controller reading flow when you're tapping those wires together. If they can, we can exclude the communication path in between the flow sensor and the controller, leaving a failure at the flow sensor device as the most probable suspect of the no-flow alert. Unfortunately, because there are so many varieties of flow sensors, we can't talk about the specifics of troubleshooting them, but from a high level, we want to determine why the device is not delivering information. Are the flow components not spinning, or is it not creating a pulse that the controller can hear? If you've got a WeatherTrack flow sensor, this is where you call customer service for next steps in flow sensor troubleshooting. So if you're out troubleshooting no-flow alerts and you're sure you have a flow sensor, the first thing to do is go check and make sure the water for your irrigation system is turned on and the problem's not with the hydraulic system. If that's not it, remember the issue can be programming, where a station's flow rate is below the flow sensor's ability to read. And we want to exclude any stations that don't meet the minimum threshold. And if you're in the field troubleshooting hardware, remember the tap test to check your flow sensor and validate the communication. And for more help troubleshooting no-flow alerts, contact the HydroPoint customer service team.